really keen to see how we cover this session today. We're looking at the future of learning in AI beyond enhancement to transformation. I'm Andrew Jacobs, I'm the facilitator. But really, we don't listen to me. We want to listen to Greg and to Brandon. Greg Collins, Chief Learning Scientist at NIIT, and Brandon Dickens, the VP of Advanced Solutions at NIIT. Please do you continue to use the chat. Make sure that we get your comments and ask your questions. Cedric, lovely to see you, mate. Long time no see. Welcome, Greg and Brandon. Over to you guys.
Hi. So thanks for coming, everyone. I would like to especially encourage you to use the chat to share your experience with AI. We're really interested in hearing, if you've done some cool projects with it, we'd love to hear about them. And maybe even more if you've encountered some obstacles or had some issues trying to get it to work right for you. That would be really useful to hear, and I think it would be great for the rest of the audience. So what we're going to be talking about today is we're trying to take a little glimpse around the corner into the future, not very far, but to look at what's coming, in the use of AI in learning. And I mean, to sort of spoil the whole talk's conclusion in a sense, we've come to believe over the past couple of years that Gen AI is going to change almost everything about learning. That literally in 5 years, it's going to be hard to recognize the way we do learning, and a lot of the things that we've taken to be sort of central to learning are going to go away in favor of Gen AI based solutions. And to sort of frame talk, we have something we call a maturity model, which is an attempt to sort of look at the all the different ways you can use AI to sort of create learning and classify them in terms of sort of their ambition and complexity to some extent. It's very simple. You see it has 4 levels. The lowest level we call accelerate, and that means basically just using Gen AI to speed up exactly what we've always been doing in learning. So it's Gen AI is incredibly fast at creating content and creating sort of content related ideas like designs. So we're seeing something between 10 and 20 times, just astonishing speed ups in how fast we can do how fast we can create content. The next level we call elevate, and the idea of elevate is just to say that the speed ups you can get are so enormous that it starts to make it possible to make a real qualitative change in the way we do learning. That we can substitute sort of the best kind of learning we know how to do, sort of immersive, rich immersive learning for learning we've in the past done out of a compromise because we didn't have enough time, didn't have enough budget, didn't have enough subject matter expertise to do what we really would like to do. So we think we're already seeing a sort of step change across the industry in terms of creating much better content with the same kind of timelines and budgets because AI is so powerful. But we're not going to talk about in this talk. We're not going to talk about either of those 2 levels. I mean, they're obviously important, certainly economically, and they're sort of going on. But we really want to look at the top 2 levels. The 3rd level we call transcend, and this is our label for learning experiences where learners are interacting directly with the AI. So there's a possibility to create an entirely new kind of set of ways to teach people using AI to as a excuse me, using AI to be a role player to create simulation story. And the top level is unify. Unify, we want to bring all those things together in one place. So moving on from that. So the reason we think AI is going to change everything is that we've been operating on a set of constraints for a long time, which basically, we know how to do great learning, but we have a lot of practical applications keeping us from doing it. So there are basically 3 lines of ways in which Excuse me, sorry, having a problem with my. There are basically three ways in which great learning stems from. Uh, you know, hang on a second, sorry.
Everything okay there, Greg? You all right?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having a problem with my interface.
Okay, no
Just give me
problem.
1 second.
Apologies, everybody. This is the fun and games we have when computers haven't
There we
woken
go.
up
All
first
right.
thing in the morning because Greg and Brandon is very early in the States right now.
Uh, yeah, actually, sorry. Okay. So, all right. So we believe there are three things that make learning, really can make learning great. One is learning by doing. So, if we could create a safe simulation uh, for, for whatever skill or somebody needs to do in the job, that's really the way to build mastery. The second is that having an expert personal tutor is something we've known for almost forever, massively accelerates learning. So when you can have a one-on-one interaction with an expert, that trumps almost everything else we can do. And the third thing is that great organizational learning occurs, when individual lessons are shared. So when somebody has an experience out in the field doing a job that would benefit everybody else, organizational learning happens when it's possible to capture that experience and translate it so everybody else gets the benefit of that. So we already know a lot about how to do all these three things in principle. So the first, for example, with simulation, you know, there's a ton of great research on how to make simulations effective. It starts with deliberate practice, which is Anders Ericsson's idea about sort of creating practice activities that focus on specific weaknesses, the challenges, and giving immediate feedback. We have the theory of situated learning, which basically tells us that people don't learn well from abstractions. They learn well in a context. And, they learn ideally a context that matches up to the context they're going to be operating in real life. We have the third theory. This is our particular name for it, critical mistake analysis. But this is basically the theory that in order to know what to focus on in a simulation, you need to look at what's hard. In order to understand what's hard, you need to look at, what goes wrong in actual practice. That is where people struggle and make patterns of mistakes that we can analyze and use to create great learning scenarios. The fourth thing is maybe the most important is the idea of emotion enhanced memory. The idea that emotion is a sort of marker for memory. When you have an emotionally affecting experience, that's the experience you're going to remember. So that applying that to simulations, we know we create emotional experiences when we give people a goal that they really care about. We can immerse them in a situation that seems realistic to them, and especially when they can experience dramatic impact to their outcomes, right? So when you make a choice in a simulation and something goes horribly wrong, that creates an emotional effect that causes that memory to stick. And so all of this stuff, we've summarized it in a somewhat cheesy mnemonic called E equals MC5, but basically it's that stands for mission, context, challenge, giving people choices on how to address challenges, showing them the consequences of their choices, and giving them coaching in the moment. So we've known for a very long time that if we can create learning experiences like that, they're incredibly effective. And the problem is that creating those kind of learning experiences is practically difficult, right? So, trying to create simulations like that involves a tremendous amount of interaction with subject experts. It involves a tremendous amount of planning out of how the simulation works. Simulations with human characters have always been especially difficult because we can't model how humans work in the way we model, for example, how airplanes work or, machines work. So, So we typically have to build branching scenarios where we effectively try to plot out everything the learner could possibly choose in the simulation, and that creates a sort of impoverished experience. It sometimes feels a little more like a multiple choice test than it does like a real simulation where you're saying, what would you do in this situation? Choose A, B, C, or D, and then you go from there, and make the next choice and so on. And furthermore, we've had the challenge that when we try to simulate soft skills, when we try to simulate things like sales or management or so on and so forth. Until very, very recently, it's not been possible to give natural language input in any general way and have the simulation respond to what the learner wants to do directly. So all of this has been a huge barrier, and Brandon and I have spent literally the last 2 decades mostly thinking about how to create simulations despite all these obstacles. But the amazing thing is that Gen AI just eliminates all these constraints at once. It's now possible to sort of create simulations very quickly, and we'll show you some examples of that. It's easy to get Gen AI large language models to model realistic human characters and to create realistic situations, and of course with large language models you get the ability to sort of communicate in natural language. So suddenly, all at once, the things we've always struggled with to create great simulations have gone away. In a similar way, you know, we've we've known for a long time that tutoring is really important, and there's a lot of great science around how to do tutoring effectively. Um, but uh, we've also not really used it as a sort of core part of the curriculum, and the reason is because we're so constrained in our ability to deliver it. So sort of learning geeks in the audience are probably familiar with the Two Sigma Problem paper by Benjamin Bloom from the 1980s, where he talked about this and did some analysis and showed that people who are tutored one-on-one perform 2 standard deviations better than people who are taught by traditional methods. So 2 standard deviations for the non-statisticians in the audience is an astonishingly large effect. It means that you perform and almost a 98th percentile compared to people who are trained by traditional methods. And Bloom called this a problem, as opposed to solution or miracle, because at the time there was no way to even imagine how we could hope to give everybody a personal tutor. And now we have, with AI, we have a device that can be a personal tutor the same way a human can. Um, so when we turn to the organizational level, right, that you know we have a lot of great methods for, at least in theory, looking at data that comes back from the field, from operations, from what happens in real life, and analyzing it to see, patterns and mistakes, and sort of deriving from those patterns and mistakes the kinds of scenarios we want to put people through in order to sort of train them up for what to expect on the job. And in some places we see really well developed versions of this. The most obvious example is in pilot training. So pilot training, is derived directly from what happens out in the real world when airplanes crash. There's a tremendous amount of effort that goes into finding, why did those mistakes happen? Where do we see patterns of mistakes across the entire aviation industry? And essentially what happens in training is that pilots train for all the things that we know can go wrong. And that's incredibly effective. But, again, this is incredibly expensive to do. So, I mean, every organization, modern organization has a huge amount of data coming in all the time that potentially could be used to identify patterns of errors, places where there are knowledge gaps and skill gaps that are causing problems, places where there are lessons learned, from incident reports, near miss reports, from customer complaints, and everything else. And the problem is we have this mountain of data that we could be using to make our training enormously better, and we just don't have the people to do that analysis. So most of that data sort of piles up, and at best it gets looked at when a disaster happens, right? So when something really goes wrong, we go and we pull out the data and we sort of come to some conclusions. But uh, but that only happens occasionally, and mostly that data goes begging. So again, so once again, we have a place where large language models can essentially analyze this kind of data in real time. They can sit there and sort of look for patterns, 24/7 across, an entire organization. And, they can analyze those patterns and figure out where we should be training people on something that currently is being missed. So, so uh, we've sort of been handed this amazing opportunity, right? We have, three things we think are incredibly important to, delivering effective learning, both individually and organizationally. They've all been places where we've had huge practical constraints, making it difficult for us to put our theories of how to do these things into practice. And now suddenly we have a tool that lets us overcome all those practical constraints at once. So that's why we think this is going to be just, I mean, it's going to change everything. So let me now turn over to Brandon. We'll show you some examples of all three of these things that we've put together, and hopefully that'll get across why we're so bullish on this. Brandon, you're on mute.
Sorry there. Not sure how that happened. All right, cool. Everybody
Sorry,
hearing me
that
okay?
that
Good?
apologies, Brandon. That was me. We were getting background from your system, so I just put you on mute while Greg was speaking. Apologies.
Oh yeah, no problem. All right, cool. So all show and tell from here on out. We're going to be looking at kind of three big areas that we're seeing a lot of movement. We're going to look at some dynamic simulations and talk a little bit about how Gen AI is enabling them. We'll look at kind of going into the future a little bit, personal tutors, which are just around the corner, and we've got some sort of conceptual material to try to help you sort of see what we think is coming in that area. And then finally, we'll look at the kind of more organizational level, what it might look like, and what we think it's going to look like when we get that lessons learned engine all hooked up and doing what we want it to do. So I've been seeing the chat, a lot of great conversation going on. I'll try to leave a little bit of time at the end. As we go through this, I'm really interested in kind of your thoughts, your ideas about the use cases. Where could these technologies that we're going to be looking at be put to use? Where does your mind go as you're getting a kind of a little bit of food for thought here? So please do let us know. So we'll start with dynamic simulation. So as Greg kind of noted, with simulations historically, the real challenge has been getting the scenarios, getting the kind of the fact patterns of those simulations defined. And a big friction point there is you have an expert in simulation design, you have an expert in some esoteric field, forensic accounting or something, and those two people have to become temporary experts in each other's domain. And it's generally an uncomfortable fit, especially for the subject matter expert. You know, historically, you've seen weeks, if not months, and sometimes very long timelines just getting through that piece of the process. So before we look at some kind of working simulations to get a sense of kind of how they feel and how they operate, I want to cover kind of one capability deep inside of large language models that has gone a little bit unnoticed, and it really does form the basis of a lot of what I'm going to show in what comes. So in the realm of kind of defining scenarios, and getting the kind of simulation fact pattern down, with large language models, you can get sort of starting point, you know, fact patterns for effectively any domain really, really quickly, and really out of the box. I mean, I think most people now know that there are really good ways that you can prop up large language models with external data. So you can really dial them in and get them really accurate to a very, very specific and very niche domain. But out of the box, they can generate very useful scenarios, at least for validation with subject matter experts very quickly. So just quick example, ask for 10 scenarios that would 20 scenarios that would apply to loan officers at a large bank. 2 seconds later, I have this list. I take decision making and loan approval, making informed decisions on loan approvals, considering both the bank's policies and customer needs. Give me 20 highly specific variants of that. And, again, seconds later, I have, now a drill in on that, where we're getting a little bit more detail. One of them kind of piqued my interest: green financing decisions, making loan decisions for projects focused on environmental sustainability, et cetera. Give me 20 specific variants of that. Now I'm drilling into that, and I've got even more detail: biomass energy production, financing biomass energy projects, assessing feedstock supply sustainability, energy production efficiency, and environmental regulations. Drilling into that, give me the full fact pattern here. I have kind of the overall narrative. I've got the fact pattern that has those details that are really difficult to get to in collaboration, but at least I have a starting point. I know I'm going to need 20 megawatts of power for 50,000 residents. I'm going to need 100,000 tons of locally sourced agricultural waste. I'm going to need $120 million of initial investment, and so forth. Detailed steps a learner would go through, possible good and bad outcomes. So we've seen in practice over and over again, when we show up to a meeting with a subject matter expert, even doing kind of traditional scenarios or simulations, and we have, instead of a blank page, we have 5 or 10 kind of outlines like this. We find that weeks or months long design process shrinking down into a meeting or two when we've propped a model up with additional kind of data, to make sure it's really dialed in on the client and the domain. Essentially, you get a good scenario right out of the box, and that is something that is going to play in every kind of at the core of a lot of what we're going to show here next. So I've got 3 samples that I want to show for sort of different reasons. The first is an AI powered simulation that we created, designed for Qatar Air. And they wanted a solution that would allow people at the ticket counter, in Doha, to practice from the moment that they walk on the job and they really know nothing, all the way through the kind of advanced customer service agents who are really looking at, VIPs, government officials, very, kind of odd and niche edge cases. um, so we put together a simulator for them, and we've had one of our designers, Alison Emsley, do a quick walkthrough of this just to make sure it's in the right state and all the buttons are being pressed that should be pressed and so forth. What you're going to see here, just to sort of make one thing apparent that maybe not apparent as you watch. Everything in the interface that you see is created by generative AI in real time. That includes the kind of videographic character, the voice coming back. All the responses are generated, specific to whatever the user has decided to say. All the supervisor updates, the ratings are happening based on a rubric. The coaching is happening in real time. Literally everything in the interface is being generated in the moment, in direct response to the learner. It's also taking into consideration their skill profile. So it's trying to create a scenario that is sort of +1, whatever their current skill level is, which is another thing that's been a little bit of a sort of holy grail, idea in learning, that we can give each learner exactly the right amount of stretch on every skill that they need, a thing that's just not been possible historically. So I'll let this one play through.
We've put together a cutting-edge AI-powered simulation that's designed to put your customer-facing employees through authentic and challenging scenarios that test their key customer service skills. Let's check it out.
You start by entering your name and choosing your difficulty level. You can specify a topic or scenario for the simulation. Next, you choose who you'll be interacting with. Let's go with Mr. James Wilson.
Good morning. My wife and I are traveling to Bangkok via Doha today. We're on separate bookings, and I've just noticed we've been assigned seats quite far apart on both flight segments. Also, we have a rather long layover in Doha, about 3 hours. I was wondering if we both get lounge access for the entire journey or just for certain segments.
You plunge straight into the interaction and need to determine how to resolve the issue.
You can click on Situation Update for more context on our scenario. That's unfortunate that the separate bookings have meant that you're in seats that are far away from each other.
Yes, it is unfortunate.
Okay, understandably, Mr. Wilson is not happy with our response. We need to look for a proper solution to help him out.
You can click on Supervisor's Update to get feedback on your performance. Here, the supervisor notes that we've shown empathy, but our response isn't complete because we haven't offered any actual solutions. You can also see your rating for various parameters, such as your listening skills and empathy, and your progress on the encounter. To help you respond appropriately to Mr. Wilson, the Research Centre is on hand. Here, you can ask questions and get help on policies, procedures, and scenario-specific content, such as aircraft seat availability. Great! The Research Centre has come back with information about the specific seats which are available on the flights both to Doha and then on to Bangkok. Looks like there's only one pair of seats left on the flight to Bangkok, so let's make sure to offer this to Mr. Wilson nice and quickly. Okay, I've had a look at the available seats, and on the flight to Doha, we can move you to seats 5A and 5B to sit together. On the flight to Bangkok, it's a lot more full. There is one pair of seats together, 7J and 7K. They are very near the galley though, so if you would prefer, we can look for seats which are adjacent, such as across the aisle, or you could take that pair of seats.
That's excellent news about the Doha flight. 5A and 5B would be perfect. The Bangkok leg, we'll take the 7J and 7K seats. Rather sit together even if it's near the galley. I really appreciate your help with this.
Now we're getting somewhere. We can continue through the simulation, offering solutions and using the Research Centre for help if needed, but you can also offer your own creative solutions. The beauty of an AI-powered simulation is that you can say anything and get a response. And when I say anything, I mean anything.
That is correct. There is unfortunately a delay. Can I offer you a puppy as compensation?
A puppy? That's quite an unusual offer. I appreciate the attempt at humour, but I'm actually quite concerned about missing this dinner.
Yeah, maybe I'd better stick to the actual company policies.
If you're in need of help at any time, the Research Centre has you covered. As well as getting responses to your specific questions, the Research Centre offers relevant war stories from Qatar Airways staff who share their experiences with similar issues. For example, here you can see a story about how a similar fare class discrepancy was solved. Each of these stories ends with a key takeaway, with lessons that can be applied to the scenario you're working on.
While many scenarios are straightforward and deal with common customer service issues, the simulation can also create extremely emotive and challenging scenarios.
Good afternoon. I need to check in for the flight to Amman departing at 5:30 p.m. I'm an aid worker with Medical Relief International, and I'm carrying essential medical supplies in my luggage. I know they might be a bit over the weight limit, but these are critically needed at the refugee camp I'm heading to. This is the last flight before the border closes.
As you can see, the simulation offers rigorous practice in realistic scenarios.
All right, so I'll go ahead and cut it there. Yeah, so a couple things to point out about that. I mean, one, you saw it go by pretty quickly, but one of the really interesting things about the current generation of large language models is they're much better at rule following or guardrail adherence than earlier models were. That last scenario with the kind of border crossing medical supplies and so forth, that was the result of a couple of sentences typed into the menu that you saw go by sort of quickly at the beginning, which means that we can allow a learner to describe a challenge that they're facing, and we can actually spin up a custom scenario for them in the moment. a manager who knows that, you know, a particular shift is going to be difficult in a particular way can describe that in a couple of sentences and actually get their folks practicing proactively something that's just about ready to hit. And, you know, once the policy and the pipeline issues are sorted out, at, you know, the stratospheric levels, you know, we'll actually be able to feed in real life context from the learner, to spin up simulations that are specific to what they're dealing with right now, what's on their calendar, what's coming through their email, you know, what we know about that learner, from interacting with them through AI, over time. Um, the second, of three that I want to show here, is I really just want to show one little piece of it. But you know, we put together a negotiation simulation, and we mostly wanted to sort of test out engagement. You know, how game like, how sticky can we make something? So we created something in sort of a silly interface, mostly to see if we could kind of achieve a certain effect. But the thing I want to draw your attention to, in this, I'm actually negotiating with a hostage taker, and the simulation builds up a very robust backstory for the hostage taker, and my job is to find that kind of emotional breaking point, so that we can start, moving towards, you know, kind of a non-violent resolution to the hostage situation. In the middle here, you'll see a little spider graph. And what we're doing is we're actually feeding in second by second voice print to an audio model. And the voice model is returning to us the kind of a set of characteristics of emotional qualities that are present in my voice and kind of the relative magnitude of them. We take that information, and first of all, it's displayed to the learner in real time as they're going through it, and that can actually be an interesting little data point that changes your performance right in the moment. But in the coaching, we actually take the emotional quality of your voice into consideration and give you coaching around that as well. So in the previous, we looked at, you know, are we choosing the right words? Are we saying the right thing? You know, with the new audio models that are available, we can actually now also give coaching around how you emotively are showing up through your voice. Very similar techniques that are available with the video layer through webcam to see how you look. Is the kind of emotive quality of your expression correct? Are you making eye contact? Is your posture right? And so forth. Um, when you can put all those things together, we're seeing really amazing use cases, in the area of leadership development, where, you know, gravitas and presence is important. A lot of kind of an explosion over the last 3 or 4 months, in clients installing these around consultative skills, consultative selling in particular, and a lot of sales cases where that ability to coach somebody, you know, kind of across, you know, both how they're the words that they're choosing and how they're putting them into play, is proving to be really, really interesting and valuable, to folks. And the third that I wanted to show, is really to show a kind of a completely different type of simulation. And I think a lot of folks kind of can grok the kind of role play case studies. I think a lot of our minds went to that right away, but it turns out, that large language models can in fact simulate very, very complex skills that are outside of just communicating. As an example of that, I want to show you something we put together for a Big Four audit firm, about a year ago. Um, they had a really interesting case. So they used an apprenticeship model, which basically means a junior auditor gets assigned to a senior auditor. They follow them around for several years, and at the end of that several year period, poof, they're a senior now. Uh, you know, the firm in this case realized that there was, just a lot of waiting around for the right thing to happen in this process, and they thought they could condense it. So rather than relying on kind of the serendipity of project assignments and the kind of irregularity of the mentoring quality that they're going to get out of various people, can you put together a simulator that will allow an auditor just to get rapid fire practice running audits, with coaching and kind of support available? And is there a way with generative AI that we could make that kind of the onboarding solution? That is, this is their kind of initial training, but could it stick around? Could it be valuable for folks who are much more senior? So we put something together. Difficulty of working with Big Four audit firms, as you might know, you're not allowed to use their logo, you can't use their name, you can't share their content, you're not allowed to share their interfaces, which puts me in a little bit of a sticky situation. But I've put together kind of a quick interface. I pulled all of their content out of the engine, and ran a couple of cases through just to try to give you a sense of what the system is doing and what it can simulate. Um, so when you start up the simulation, it looks at your previous performance, it looks at your skill profile, and it creates an entire fictional audit case for you right in the moment. Um, that kind of case includes all the financial background for the company, including the documents that you would typically get your hands on as an auditor as you're sort of getting on board. It has the audit methodology for the firm embedded, and the learner is tracked and rated against implementing that methodology. It creates an entire cast list, cast of characters for the simulation, and you can interact with these characters at any time. So it's completely nonlinear, which large language models are uniquely good at dealing with. And that's something that is kind of at the edge, I think, even of our imagination in learning and development, because that used to be so difficult to do. I think there's going to be a lot of cases for nonlinear simulation that we're gonna discover over the next couple of years. And you can also reach out to them using any communication channel that you think is right, which is actually a key decision folks are making. And finally, you get kind of a coach there who's always ready to answer questions about audit. I'm not particularly financially literate, at least not on the audit side, and so I spent a lot of time here. It'll give you contact for new people if you hear about them and you don't have their contacts and so forth. It'll also kind of fetch documents and that sort of thing that you need. So in this run through, there was a cost spike in the fictional Rio de Janeiro office. So I asked for the SG&A expense report for that time period. And I just want to show you one thing here. So it created a completely plausible set of expenses, but in it embedded this one item, over a $500,000, categorized miscellaneous, to a company called Lots of Fun Entertainment, which seems like an emergency party, and even I know that's something I, as an auditor, should probably look at. It also embedded this little kind of fingerprinting, the underline there, where everything ends in 75 cents or a lot of things. That's a sign of a very particular kind of low-level fraud, where somebody encodes basically a filterable number into expenses so they can get them out of the expense report before they share them. The large language model's ability to do this, to know that I'm a novice and thus to put something like this in, whereas, we had our chief financial officer go through the simulation to help us test. He was emailing us at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. Look at this crazy little difficult scenario that I've got to figure out here. I actually had to think about this. So the fact that we can have a simulation stretch across that level of kind of expertise is, again, something that we've not ever had at our disposal before. And I think it's going to really change the way that we think about creating solutions when we can get these robust simulations and really embed them through the entire skill life cycle of an employee. The other thing about that, and I mentioned this a couple times, skill profiles. Um, Another element of that just comes along for the ride when you're thinking about getting learners interacting with real kind of job tasks and real job challenges, is that because this is all data, every simulation run is effectively an assessment, and it's an observed performance assessment. You're seeing how a learner would really perform in a challenging situation on the job, and you can extract from that all kinds of interesting data, because you can actually take a large language model, give it a very detailed skills rubric, point it at the transcripts that come out of these scenarios, and develop really detailed skill profiles, skill graphs over time. And you can start getting towards even a little bit of predictive analytics in the results here. You can start seeing things like, are there compliance risks that are inherent in how my audience is treating a particular kind of challenge? So, for instance, in one case, in the consultative selling space for a big tech company, they saw coming back in the data that people were misrepresenting how personal identifiable information was handled. And the large language model could surface that information and tell them, look, 10 out of your 12, kind of salespeople are misrepresenting PII, and that's a big kind of compliance exposure area. Maybe do a detailed scenario, detailed kind of little simulation around that. So I think data is going to be kind of the star. Moving on from dynamic simulations, and just a couple of very quick things to show here. In the area of personal tutors, there's kind of the brain of the operation is ready today. The part that I guess 3 years ago would have been magical is done. There's a lot of policy issues around personal information and so forth that need to be sorted, and that's going to be sorted at very, very high levels, all the way up to government. And the other side is just the old school piping problems, like how do we get the data? How do we get permission to get data flowing in the right places to give a personal tutor the right amount of context? But I want to show you really quickly just a concept video, and then a quick prototype. For this concept video, we had generative AI model the whole conversation, decide the learning intervention, decide the coaching, everything about this. And the reason that's important is, with large language models, if the model can reason through the situation, the model has the capability to do the kind of, again, magical part, the thinking part here. The thing that is really just missing at this point, and just to call it out clearly, is that policy and that piping. So we need a lot of data on the learner, and we need to be able to get that flowing into the simulation. And once we can do those two things, once we have the permission and we have the piping, this is going to be ready. So we're talking about a matter of years here, not decades. I'll let this play.
Meridian call in 5 minutes.
I'm toast.
I see you remember the last time.
Yeah, they shredded me.
All right, let's run a quick simulation. I'm Brian now.
These numbers don't work, Alex.
I think I can bump the discount up to 15%.
Not enough.
And throw in premium support?
What are you doing?
Completely caving.
Okay, think about it. What's their actual problem?
Budget timing?
That's right. It's not about price. Now, again.
It's about your fiscal calendar, isn't it?
How did you know?
I did my homework.
Great. Are you ready?
Yeah, I got this.
You're still way outside our budget range.
Your heart rate is 140. Just breathe. You've practiced this. You're ready.
Brian, is this about making your Q3 numbers?
Wow. I mean, that's definitely an issue.
What if we build 70% in Q4, 30% in Q3, plus early beta access?
That, I might be able to work with that.
Nailed it.
Okay, tell me what you need.
So as I said, the thinking part of this is basically here today. And I mean, we're working through a ton of prototypes on this right now. And what we're seeing is that the model can, when propped up with kind of the science of tutoring, and the various modes of tutoring that we know is going to work, you know, the AI is able to reason very, very well and choose very appropriate kind of paths through skill development. And it's able to do that while creating a really robust picture of the learner in the background. So full skill graphs and so forth. The coach can appropriately choose kind of practice environments for learners, and create challenges for them in the moment. This is a cloud computing little challenge that we've built in, with feedback. And it can take even that practice information and incorporate it, make sure that it's doing the right tutoring things around kind of protecting the breakthrough moment that you've just gotten, and sort of calibrating what's going to come next and how you think about yourself from that. So, tutoring is a combination of sort of psychological principles and tutoring principles and learning principles all coming together. And when you give the large language models the kind of the right kind of approaches that it should be looking at, it can select them and blend them appropriately, and get learners to a really interesting place. And as Greg said, I mean, the big deal here is this is the first time we've seen a path to achieving the two sigma miracle, as opposed to looking at it as a two sigma problem. And then finally, on instant lessons learned, this is an area that we're really, really excited about. Same caveats as last time. We put together a very quick concept video here, and to try to illustrate what it's going to look like. The policy and the piping problems that need to be resolved yet, are the same as they were for the personal tutor, but maybe magnified here because there's a lot more data that goes into this one. But let me go ahead and play this quick concept video.
Mia, we have a situation at the Denver hub. Coolant leak.
How serious?
2 engineers were exposed, one had to go to the hospital.
Oh no.
Here's the thing. I think it's part of a pattern. 5 incidents in the last 3 months. The previous 4 were near misses.
What connects them?
Each occurred right after a software update. I've identified the cause, and there's good news. A simple change in the safety protocols would avoid the problem.
Okay.
I've also created a training simulation to address the issue.
All right, let's see it.
Okay, you're at the Phoenix Hub. The monthly software update just completed.
Got it.
Here's the control panel. Diagnostic complete, all indicators green.
Okay, this isn't my area of expertise, but I guess I'll hit the initiate restart button.
Warning, coolant pressure spike detected. Evacuate now. Warning, coolant pressure spike detected. Evacuate now.
Oh wait, everything showed normal.
That's what happened in Denver. Look at the digital sensors versus the physical gauge.
Oh wow. The digital shows normal, but the physical gauge is in the red.
After the update, there's a brief window where the digital sensors reboot. That gap, it's enough to miss a pressure spike.
So the lesson is...
check the physical gauge before restart.
Perfect. How soon can we deploy this?
I can roll it out to all sites as soon as we have a sign-off from the head of safety. Should I initiate the request?
5 near misses, 1 hospitalization, and no one connected the dots. Do it. Let's fix this before something even worse happens.
On it.
All right, so the big deal here, with instant lessons learned, I mean, it's taking that kind of pilot training example and kind of applying it to every role in every organization. And it looks like there's a path to doing that, and one that we'll be able to achieve in the next several years. So Greg, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I'll do this really quickly so we might be able to take a couple of questions. I mean, so, I said at the beginning, we think it's going to change everything about learning. I mean, in particular, we think it's going to let us give a kind of flight simulator type simulation for almost every job or skill. We think that everyone at least in most or major organizations is going to have a personal AI tutor. We think that, when that happens, we think courses are going to go away. It's sort of one interesting side effect, that the idea of pre-compiled sort of learning paths that are meant to serve a bunch of people and sort of compromise between their individual needs. That's going to go away. We think lessons learned in the field are going to show up overnight, literally as new training. We think that, and we think that, the sum total of all this is just going to be a massive wave of sort of upskilling, like much more effective training across all industries. And so, in quick summary, there are three things we talked about, that AI is going to change massively, that each of these in their own, we think would be a revolution, really. Having all three happen at once is sort of incredible. And as Brandon said, we have the technology in terms of the AI to deliver all this right now. And the issues basically standing in the way are deployment issues. They're serious deployment issues, including the issues of policy around what we're allowed to do and how it's made safe. But once these things are deployed, we think in 5 years, you're really not going to recognize how learning works. And thank you. And we'd love to answer a couple questions here.
Awesome work, guys. Wow. The chat and the conversation, I know you haven't seen the chat, Brandon. Greg has. The chat and the conversation has been firing the whole time. A massive thank you to everybody for your thoughts and comments and questions. Really, really interesting. The way people are thinking around some of this stuff. There are a couple of questions that I really think are interesting. So I'm going to do one of my questions first of all, and it's to pick up something that you guys first said really early on. Is that, Greg, you said 20 years experience doing this stuff, you and Brandon. And there's a question. It was also picked up by somebody as well. Is that how people in the future are going to generate that 20 years experience if we've got AI tools that are doing this stuff for them?
Well, I think the answer is going to be, we've seen play out with other technologies that maybe aren't quite as revolutionary, but every new technology sort of takes away a skill set that people used to have, right? So, who knows how far it goes back to stone axes, but carpenters used to do carpentry with chisels and, hand tools. Now they use routers. And we used to do math by hand, and now we use Excel or whatever, right? And we used to do dead reckoning navigation. Now we use GPSs. The list goes on and on. I think AI is just going to be a bigger version of that. It's like, there are skills that are going to get left behind because we can let the AI do it, and they're going to kind of die out, except as a sort of historical study. And that's, I think it's easy to see that as kind of sad in a way, right? But, it always feels like something was lost, but it's lost in the favor of something that's gained, which is now, the fact that we don't have to do this now frees us up to do other things. And, I'm a techno optimist, as you can tell. My belief is historically, every time we've done this, we've kind of gone on to bigger and better things. And some people have a dystopian view of what AI is going to do. I think it's going to be, like a bigger version of waves of technology that came before. I think it's going to free us to do other things.
Yeah, fab. Anything to add to that, Brandon?
No, that's pretty much it. Just saying it a slightly different way. The expectations of that junior are going to change, but it's not going to mean the junior goes away. They're just going to be starting without needing to go through all of the training and experience they would have needed to get to the point, and experts are now going to be able to do something that we can't even imagine. And that's the imagination gap we all have, is we don't know what that expert's going to look like in 10 years.
The world is different now. As I constantly tell people, if you take a school leaver into your business now, they're younger than the iPhone. And their world, I know. I say that one, and everybody goes, "Oh my God, don't I feel old?" No, what it means is that the world that they have been born into and grown up in is incredibly different, and we have to recognize that. We can't retain that the same way. We have to think about job design. There's a question from Stephen that I would want to pick up if I can do. Sorry, guys. just to do with the war, he says the war stories are brilliant. Can you provide some insight on how they were acquired and whether their delivery is contextual?
Well, first of all, it's definitely contextual. I'm sorry. Well, I mean, yeah, it's totally contextual. So that's one of the really cool things you can do. The AI can call up relevant stories, not by some simplistic sort of indexing scheme. It can actually think deeply and say what story actually conceptually is relevant to the thing we have here. In this particular case, I mean, we just had a set of stories that our instructional designers compiled specifically for this project. But you can imagine all kinds of things happening. I mean, you can imagine, wherever there's a pre-existing trove of case studies or war stories or whatever that the AI can tap into it can definitely do that. And I think I mentioned this in the commentary, but you can even imagine AI going out and proactively collecting war stories. And I mean that raises some issues that might, legitimately make some people nervous. I mean, you've sort of imagine AI looking over your shoulder all the time and compiling information about what you're doing on the job was definitely a double-edged sword. But I mean, I think it will happen. I think that we'll sort through the kind of privacy issues involved in that, and AI is going to be able to come back from the field. I mean, because it's hard to wrap your head around this, but I mean, AI is going to be very connected. So it's going to be connected to all kinds of information sources on the job, including video, including audio, including all the sort of detailed, records coming out of all the software that's running. It's going to, we're going to be able to piece together what happened in almost any job incident the way they now piece together aircraft crashes from the data recorders. And again, that's going to be fantastic in one way and incredibly frightening in sort of privacy terms in another way. But that's coming, and that's so auto war story generation is gonna happen.
Yeah, Brandon.
Yeah, no, I mean, in this particular case, we encode it as the fact pattern. So to the context issue, the stories were stylized and kind of written on the fly to fit the kind of mistake or the situation that the learner was looking at the moment, from a core fact pattern that it couldn't deviate from. So you do get that personalization kind of element.
Fabulous. We've hit time. A massive thank you, guys. Really fascinating and just incredible to see where we are with some of this stuff now. Please, if you enjoyed it, put a comment in the chat. I know there's other questions. If you would like to connect with Greg and with Brandon and me, should you wish to, our LinkedIn details on the left-hand side there. There's a link to the LT webinars and also the future ones as well. Like I said, this has been recorded and will be available to download from tomorrow. Thank you again, everybody. These sessions only work so well when everybody engages, and the conversation was outstanding. So well done. Round of applause to you all as well. Really fabulous stuff. I am going to stop the recording now.